Hello, 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 and today we will be talking about the three forms of government. This presentation was made by Samantha, me, myself, Caleb, Courtney, and Jose. So first we want to talk about the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The 10th Amendment was intended to provide another assurance that the people's rights would be protected. This was made so the federal governments wouldn't become too powerful. Next, we want to talk about the expressed powers. Right granted Congress to perform its duties. Some of the rights included right to tax, right to borrow money, right to set naturalization standards, right to create right to create and maintain a military, right to coin money, right to establish a post office, and right to regulate commerce, etc. Next is implied power. This ruling established the doctrine of implied powers, granting Congress broad discretion to fulfill its constitutional responsibilities. Here it is right here. Next is the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause found in The Supremacy Clause found in Article 4 of the Constitution establishes that the Constitution, federal laws, and treaties are the supreme law of the land, taking precedence over any conflicting state laws. This means state judges must follow federal law even if it contradicts state law, ensuring a unified legal system and preventing states from undermining federal authority in areas like national security, currency, or interstate commerce. It also underpins the principle of federal prepetition, where federal law can override state law when there is a conflict. Next is the Elastic Clause, also known as the Necessary and Proper Clause, is a provision in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution that gives Congress the power to make laws necessary and proper for carrying out the enumerated powers. This allows for implied powers beyond those explicitly listed, and its broad interpretation has allowed the government to adapt to modern challenges throughout history. Regulatory laws are made. The executive branch writes regulations that become enforceable law that people must follow. After a bill becomes a law, it goes through many different directions. Once they find a path, they also need to go through a process before it can be enforced. First step, laws passed by the legislative often take a year or more. Agencies look over the law and consider alternatives and look for possible impacts. For rules that are determined to have impacts of $100 million or more in a year, the president required agencies to start regulatory impact analyses that estimates both the expected benefits and expected costs of alternative approaches. Important regulations are reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget, and a preamble explaining the rule is included. The review happens to make sure it is consistent with the president's policies and does not conflict with our agencies. Does not conflict with other agencies. Regulatory laws are enforced by Congress passing a law designed to address a need or a problem. The appropriate regulatory agencies then create regulations necessary to implement the law. Individuals and other entities can be fined, sanctioned, and criminally prosecuted for violating federal regulations. Once the review is complete, the regulation is published as a proposal and open to public comments for 30 to 60 days, then revised, published again to the Federal Register, and then made into law. Rarely regulation is changed after being issued, but parties can sue to have it modified or overturned in court. Congress can vote to disapprove a rule after it's issued. How do these fit? Regulatory agencies blur the line between the roles of the separation of powers, sometimes fitting into these roles, which at times may work great, but at other times not so much. Of course, it often resembles the three branches and also holds the power of these three branches. They are part of the executive branch while also making laws of the legislative branch and usually holding hearings like the judicial branch. And they also enforce laws similar to the executive branch. Constitutions are often amended in a two-step process. It is proposed and then further ratified. An amendment can be proposed by a 2/3 vote in the House and Senate, or a national convention called by 2/3 of a state. Three examples of this two-step process would be the 9th Amendment, which allowed women to vote, the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition, and 26th Amendment, which lowered the national voting age to 18. And that is our presentation.